The stars in the Kepler 442 system looked just like any other stars to Commander Vexhai. He had seen thousands of star systems during his long career with the Hegemony fleet. Most were empty. Some had primitive life forms that quickly submitted when they saw the power of Hegemony ships. This system was supposed to be different, but Vexhai did not know why yet. His ship, the Sovereign's Reach, was one of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. The hull was made from crystalline materials that could absorb energy weapons. The engines used exotic matter that could bend space itself. The weapons could destroy entire planets if needed. In 3,000 years of expansion across the galaxy, no species had ever successfully resisted the hegemony. "Commander," called his sensor officer, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. "We have detected an unknown vessel at the edge of the system." Vexhai looked at the main display screen. The image showed a strange ship unlike anything in their databases. It was made of simple metal alloys, painted in dark colors with bright markings on the sides. The ship looked crude compared to hegemony technology. It was much smaller than his cruiser and seemed to be powered by basic fusion reactors. "What species built this vessel?" asked Vexhai. "Unknown, sir. The computer shows no match in our records. The ship appears to belong to a previously undiscovered civilization." Vexhai studied the sensor readings more carefully. The alien ship was heading directly toward them at a steady speed. It showed no signs of fear or hesitation. Most primitive species either ran away immediately or tried to send surrender messages when they encountered hegemony vessels. This ship was doing neither. "Sir," said the communications officer, "should we broadcast the standard first contact protocol?" The standard protocol was simple. The hegemony would demand immediate surrender and submission to their empire. Species that complied were allowed to exist as servant races. Those that refused were eliminated. In 3 millennia, only a handful of species had been foolish enough to choose destruction over submission. "Yes, transmit the demand," ordered Vexhai. "Full power on all frequencies." The message went out in dozens of languages and mathematical concepts. It explained that the hegemony now claimed this system and all life within it. The unknown species had one chance to surrender completely or face total annihilation. Minutes passed. The alien ship continued its approach without changing course or speed. No response came through any communication channel. "Perhaps their technology is too primitive to receive our transmission," suggested the tactical officer. "Impossible," replied Vexhai. "Any species capable of interstellar travel must have basic radio technology. They are choosing to ignore us." This was unusual but not unprecedented. Some species tried to show courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It never worked, but some tried anyway. The result was always the same. On the human ship, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge and watched the alien vessel through her view screen. After 3 years of exploring beyond Earth's solar system, humanity had finally met another space-traveling civilization. The alien ship was beautiful in its own way, with a hull that seemed to glow with internal light. "Captain," said her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien vessel." "Put it on speakers, Lieutenant." The bridge filled with sounds and mathematical patterns that meant nothing to human ears. The translation computer worked for several minutes before producing text on the main screen. Chen read the message aloud. "You will surrender immediately to the Hegemony Empire. Your species will submit to our authority. Your ships will be destroyed if you resist. This is your only warning." The bridge crew looked at their captain. They had come so far from Earth hoping to find friends among the stars. Instead, they had found bullies who demanded submission before even attempting real communication. "Well," said Chen with a slight smile, "that's not happening." Her tactical officer, a young man named Rodriguez, checked his console. "Captain, their ship is much larger than ours. Sensors show advanced technology we don't understand. We should consider our options carefully." Chen nodded. She understood the situation perfectly. Earth had sent 12 ships to explore this region of space. The Defiance was the fastest and had arrived first. The nearest human backup was days away. This alien empire clearly expected immediate surrender from any species they encountered. "Helmsman, maintain course and speed," ordered Chen. "Tactical, charge all weapons but keep them powered down. Communications, send a message on all frequencies." "What should the message say, Captain?" Chen thought for a moment. "Tell them this. We are humans from the planet Earth. We come in peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. We do not surrender to anyone. The message was transmitted to the alien ship. On the hegemony vessel, Commander Vexhai read the translation with growing amazement. They refuse to surrender? He asked. That appears to be correct, sir. Do they understand what they are facing? Run a full sensor analysis of their vessel. The tactical computer examined the human ship in detail. The results appeared on the main screen. The alien vessel used primitive kinetic weapons, basic fusion power and hull plating that would not stop hegemony energy weapons. Its maximum speed was less than half that of a hegemony cruiser. Sir, reported the tactical officer, our computer estimates their technology level to be approximately 600 years behind our current capabilities. Vexhai could not understand the situation. No primitive species had ever refused hegemony demands when faced with such overwhelming technological superiority. It was irrational. It was suicide. Perhaps they do not understand the consequences of refusal, suggested his communications officer. Send another message, ordered Vexhai. Explain exactly what will happen if they continue to resist. The second hegemony transmission was more detailed. It explained that the hegemony controlled 47 star systems and had destroyed countless species that chose resistance over submission. It described their weapons technology and their ability to reduce planets to cosmic dust. Captain Chen listened to the translation with her crew. The alien empire was clearly trying to frighten them into surrender. They were explaining their power and their history of conquest. Captain, said Rodriguez quietly, maybe we should consider negotiating. We could buy time until reinforcements arrive. Chen shook her head. They're not interested in negotiation, Lieutenant. They want complete surrender. They want us to kneel, but Captain, we can't fight a ship that advanced. Maybe not, agreed Chen, but we can sure as hell try. She turned to address her entire crew through the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We have encountered an alien empire that demands our immediate surrender. They claim to control dozens of star systems through force and intimidation. They expect us to submit without a fight. Chen paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. They were young men and women from Earth, chosen for their skills and their courage. They had volunteered to explore the unknown reaches of space. I want you all to understand our situation clearly, continued Chen. They have superior technology. They outnumber us. They could probably destroy us in a straight fight, but they've made one critical mistake. They think technology is the only thing that matters in a battle. The captain's voice grew stronger. They don't understand that humans have something more powerful than advanced weapons. We have the absolute refusal to kneel to bullies. We have the willingness to fight for what we believe in, regardless of the odds. Chen looked directly at the view screen showing the alien vessel. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Charge all weapons. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget. On the hegemony ship, Commander Vexhai watched his sensors as the human vessel's power signatures changed. Weapon systems came online. The primitive ship was actually preparing to fight. Sir, said his tactical officer with amazement, they're powering weapons. They actually intend to resist. Vexhai had seen many species make desperate final stands. Usually they lasted minutes before being overwhelmed. This would be no different. Charge weapons, he ordered. Prepare to fire a warning shot. Perhaps a demonstration of our power will restore their sanity. Neither commander understood what was about to happen. The hegemony expected quick submission after a show of force. The humans expected to probably die fighting for their principles. What neither side realized was that this encounter would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn that some species valued freedom more than survival, and the hegemony was about to discover that advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that simply refused to lose. The first shot from the hegemony cruiser was meant to be a warning. Commander Vexhai ordered his weapons officer to fire a low-powered particle beam at the human ship's engines. The beam would disable their propulsion system and force them to surrender without causing major casualties. The purple energy beam lanced across space and struck the Defiance along its rear section. The hull plating glowed white-hot where the beam hit. Sparks flew across the human ship's bridge as power systems overloaded, but the ship kept moving forward. Damage report, called Captain Chen as she gripped her command chair. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported her damage control officer. We've lost 2 engine cores, but the main drive is still operational. Armor held better than expected. Chen nodded. The beam had been powerful enough to cripple most ships, but Human engineers had built the Defiance to take punishment. Every system had backups. Every critical component was armored and shielded. On the Hegemony ship, Vex-High stared at his sensor readings with confusion. The warning shot should have disabled the primitive vessel completely. Instead, it had barely slowed them down. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "their hull composition is unusual. Dense metal alloys with some kind of ceramic composite backing. Much heavier than standard ship construction." "Why would they build ships so heavily?" asked Vex-High. "Unknown, sir. It seems inefficient. The extra weight would reduce speed and maneuverability." What the Hegemony commander did not understand was that humans built their warships differently than other species. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had enjoyed relative peace under Hegemony rule. Most civilizations had forgotten how to fight real wars. But humans had spent their entire existence in conflict. Every human ship was designed for battle. "Captain," said Rodriguez from his tactical station, "their weapon systems are charging again. I think they're preparing for a real attack this time." "Then we better hit them first," replied Chen. "All batteries target their weapon arrays. Let's see how they handle some human-style diplomacy." The Defiance opened fire with everything it had. Railguns launched metal slugs at incredible velocities. Missile tubes fired nuclear-tipped projectiles in coordinated salvos. Point defense lasers added their energy to the barrage. The attack caught the Hegemony crew completely off guard. In 3 millennia of conquest, no primitive species had ever fired first. They had always waited to be attacked, then surrendered quickly when they realized resistance was hopeless. The railgun slugs hit the Hegemony shields at 30% of light speed. The kinetic energy was enormous. Shield generators overloaded trying to absorb the impact. Warning alarms sounded throughout the Sovereign's reach as power systems struggled to compensate. "What kind of weapons are those?" demanded Vex-High as his ship shook under the bombardment. "Kinetic projectiles, sir," replied his tactical officer with amazement. "They're using mass drivers to accelerate solid metal slugs. Our shields are designed to deflect energy beams, not physical impacts." The nuclear missiles arrived seconds later. Each warhead detonated against the Hegemony shields in brilliant flashes of light and radiation. The exotic matter that powered the shield generators began to destabilize under the combined assault. "Shields down to 60%, reported the shield technician Vex. I could not believe what he was hearing. A primitive species was actually damaging his advanced warship. It should have been impossible. "Return fire," he ordered. Full power. The Hegemony cruiser unleashed its main weapons. Particle beams and plasma cannons fired at maximum intensity. The attack struck the human ship along its entire length. Hull plating vaporized. Internal explosions sent debris spinning into space, but the Defiance kept fighting. Captain Chen felt the ship shudder as enemy weapons tore through her vessel. Half the bridge consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. "Casualties?" she asked. 37 dead, 62 wounded, came the grim reply. "We've lost main power to decks 3 through 6. Forward missile tubes are offline. What about the railguns?" "Still operational, Captain. Backup power is holding." Chen wiped blood from her forehead where flying debris had cut her. Around the bridge, her crew worked frantically to keep their weapons functioning despite the damage. No one had panicked. No one had suggested surrender. "Continue firing," she ordered. "Target their shield generators." The human ship pivoted slowly, bringing undamaged weapon batteries to bear. More railgun slugs hammered the Hegemony shields. More missiles detonated against their defensive barriers. On the alien ship, Vex-High watched his shield strength continue to drop. 40%. 30%. His weapons officer was inflicting terrible damage on the human vessel, but they refused to stop fighting. "Sir," said his communications officer, "perhaps we should call for reinforcements. This engagement is not proceeding as expected." Vex-High felt a chill of fear. In his entire career, he had never needed help to defeat a single primitive ship. But this enemy was unlike anything the Hegemony had encountered. "Negative," he replied. "We will handle this ourselves. Continue firing." But as the battle continued, it became clear that something was very wrong. The human ship should have been destroyed minutes ago. Instead, it kept fighting with damaged systems and a reduced crew. Worse, they were fighting with a skill and determination that spoke of extensive combat experience. The tactical displays showed something that made no sense to Hegemony thinking. The human ship had been designed specifically for war. Every system was built to survive battle damage. The crew was trained to fight even when their ship was falling apart around them. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "I'm analyzing their combat patterns. This species has extensive knowledge of space warfare. Their tactics are sophisticated and aggressive." "How is that possible?" asked Vex-High. "They only achieved interstellar flight recently." "Unknown, sir. But they fight like a species that has been at war for centuries." What Vex-High did not understand was that humans had indeed been at war for centuries, not in space but on their homeworld. They had fought thousands of conflicts using every type of weapon imaginable. When they finally reached the stars, they brought that experience with them. Human ships were built by engineers who understood that battles were won by the side that could keep fighting longest. Human crews were trained by officers who knew that wars were won through determination, not just superior technology. The Defiance fired another salvo at the hegemony shields. This time, several railgun slugs penetrated the weakened defensive barrier and struck the hull directly. Crystalline armor cracked under the impact. Internal systems sparked and failed. "Sir, we have hull breaches on decks 12 and 15, reported the damage control officer. "Shield generators are operating at minimal efficiency." Vex-High realized with growing horror that his advanced warship was losing a battle against a primitive enemy. It should have been impossible, but the evidence was right in front of him. "Perhaps," suggested his first officer quietly, "we should consider withdrawal. We could return with additional ships." "No," snapped Vex-High. "We do not retreat from primitives." But even as he spoke, he knew the situation was becoming desperate. His ship was heavily damaged. The human vessel, despite suffering terrible casualties, continued its relentless attack. They showed no signs of weakening resolve. On the human ship, Captain Chen surveyed the carnage around her bridge. Most of her crew was dead or wounded. The ship was holding together through emergency power and pure stubbornness. But they were still fighting. "Captain," said Rodriguez, blood streaming from a head wound, "we've got more contacts on long-range sensors. Looks like the aliens are calling for help." Chen smiled grimly. "Then we better make sure they regret it. All remaining missiles, arm nuclear warheads for proximity detonation. Let's see if we can take their shields down completely." The final human missile salvo launched from damaged tubes. Each warhead detonated as close to the hegemony ship as possible. The combined nuclear explosions finally overwhelmed the alien shields completely. For the first time in 3,000 years, a hegemony warship was defenseless against enemy fire. "Shields are down," reported the tactical officer with panic in his voice. Vex-High stared at his displays in shock. The impossible had happened. A primitive species had actually managed to defeat hegemony technology through sheer determination and tactical skill. "Sir," said his communications officer urgently, "3 more ships are entering the system. Hegemony reinforcements are arriving." But as Vex-High watched his sensors, he saw something that filled him with dread. New contacts were also appearing on the opposite side of the system. Human ships were coming too. The small skirmish was about to become a real battle, and for the first time in his career, Commander Vex-High was not confident that the hegemony would win. 3 more hegemony cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Admiral Kethvar, commanding the reinforcement fleet from his flagship Eternal Dominion, immediately assessed the tactical situation. What he saw defied all logic and experience. The Sovereign's reach was heavily damaged and defenseless. Its shields were completely down. Hull breaches leaked atmosphere into space. Multiple weapon systems were offline, and it was still locked in combat with a single primitive vessel that should have been destroyed hours ago. "What is the status of Commander Vex-High's engagement?" asked Admiral Kethvar. "Sir," replied his tactical officer with obvious confusion, "the primitive vessel has somehow managed to penetrate the Sovereign's Reach's defenses. Both ships have sustained heavy damage, but the alien ship continues to fight." Admiral Kethvar studied the sensor data more carefully. The unknown species ship was barely holding together. Life support was failing on multiple decks. Primary power was gone. Half the crew appeared to be dead or wounded, yet their weapons were still firing with mechanical precision. "How is this possible?" he asked. "No primitive species has ever lasted more than minutes against a single hegemony cruiser." Before his officers could respond, new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Ships were approaching from the opposite direction at maximum speed. The computer identified them as belonging to the same unknown species. Captain Chen felt a surge of relief as her communications officer managed to restore partial contact with the approaching fleet. "Captain, this is Admiral Torres aboard the Unbroken. We received your distress signal. What's your status?" Chen looked around her devastated bridge. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. Most of her crew lay dead at their stations. The ship was barely functional, but they were still fighting. "Admiral, we've engaged an alien empire that demands our surrender. They have superior technology, but we've managed to damage one of their ships. Be advised, they have reinforcements arriving." "Understood, Captain. Hold your position. Help is on the way." Torres cut the communication and turned to his fleet commanders. 12 more human ships had answered the distress call, racing across interstellar space at maximum speed. They had arrived to find their fellow humans locked in a desperate battle against impossible odds. "Analysis of the alien vessels?" he asked his tactical officer. "Sir, their technology appears to be centuries ahead of ours. Energy weapons, exotic matter shielding, faster than light drives we don't understand. 4 ships total, with more possibly coming." Admiral Torres nodded grimly. The human fleet was outnumbered and outgunned. Under normal circumstances, any rational commander would attempt to negotiate or withdraw. But Torres had not spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force to back down from bullies. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. We have encountered an alien empire that fires on human vessels without provocation. They demand our complete surrender. That is not acceptable." He paused, looking at the tactical display showing the battered Defiant still exchanging fire with the enemy. Captain Chen and her crew have been fighting alone for 3 hours against overwhelming odds. They have shown these aliens that humans do not surrender. Now we're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity. The human fleet spread into attack formation. The massive bulk carrier New Horizon immediately began launching single-seat fighters. Each fighter carried a single nuclear warhead and a pilot trained to use it if necessary. Admiral Kethvar watched the human fleet deploy with professional interest. Despite being outnumbered, his ship still held overwhelming technological superiority. The primitive weapons that had somehow damaged the Sovereign's reach would be ineffective against 4 fresh cruisers with full shields. "Open communications with the human fleet," he ordered. "We will offer them one chance to surrender before we destroy them completely." The transmission reached Admiral Torres moments later. The alien commander's image appeared on the main screen of the Unbroken. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Human Admiral, I am Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Fleet. Your ship has somehow managed to damage one of our vessels through trickery and primitive tactics. This will not happen again." The alien admiral gestured to his tactical display. "You face 4 advanced warships with technology beyond your understanding. Your fleet is hopelessly outmatched. I offer you one opportunity to surrender completely and submit to hegemony authority." Torres listened to the translation with growing anger. These aliens had attacked a human ship without provocation, then demanded surrender when their victims fought back. "Alien Admiral," he replied, "you fired on a human vessel in human space. You have killed human citizens. You now demand that we kneel to your empire? My response is simple: go to hell." The communication cut off abruptly. On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Kethvar stared at the blank screen in amazement. No species had ever responded to hegemony demands with such outright defiance. "Sir," asked his first officer, "should we proceed with the attack?" "Yes, destroy them all. Leave no survivors." The 4 hegemony cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and plasma bolts crossed space toward the human fleet. But instead of trying to outrun the superior weapons, the human ships did something unexpected. They charged directly into the attack. The Unbroken and 3 destroyers accelerated toward the hegemony fleet at maximum speed. Nuclear missiles launched in massive salvos. Railguns fired continuously. The smaller human fighters spread out in all directions, making themselves difficult targets while closing for attack runs. Admiral Kethvar watched the human response with growing unease. This was not how primitive species were supposed to behave. They should have tried to flee or begged for mercy. Instead, they were attacking with a coordination and skill that spoke of extensive military experience. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the human ships are using the same kinetic weapons that damage the Sovereign's reach, but our shields are at full power. They cannot penetrate our defenses. The first human salvo struck the hegemony shields and was absorbed harmlessly. But more missiles were already in flight. The railgun slugs arrived in continuous streams, hammering the defensive barriers with pure kinetic energy. Shield strength holding at 90%, reported the shield technician. But Admiral Kethvar noticed something troubling. The human attack was not random. They were focusing their fire on specific points, trying to overload individual shield generators. Worse, their fighters were approaching from multiple directions, forcing his ships to divide their defensive fire. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fighter pilots." "Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with voices speaking in the human language. The translation computer worked frantically to process the rapid communications. "Eagle 1, target the port shield generator on the lead ship." "Roger, Fox 2. I need cover on my attack run." "Copy that." "Eagle 1, going in hot." Admiral Kethvar listened to the fighter pilot chatter with growing alarm. These humans were coordinating their attacks with military precision. They were discussing tactics and target priorities like experienced combat veterans. "How long have these humans been at war?" he asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. But they fight like a species with centuries of combat experience." The first human fighter reached attack range of the Eternal Dominion. Point defense weapons fired frantically, trying to stop the small craft. Most of the fighters were destroyed by the concentrated fire, but a few made it through the defensive barrier. "Fighter incoming," shouted the tactical officer. "It's on a collision course with the shield generator." The human pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Park, saw the alien point defense weapons tracking toward her fighter. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it was almost certainly suicide. But her nuclear warhead could take down the enemy shields if she could get close enough. "For Earth!" she screamed as her fighter slammed into the hegemony ship's hull. The nuclear detonation at point-blank range overloaded the shield generator completely. A section of the alien ship's defenses collapsed, leaving it vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Admiral Kethvar felt his ship shake as the human fighter sacrificed itself against his shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as backup systems struggled to compensate for the damage. "Shield strength down to 60%, reported the technician with obvious concern. "Sir," called the tactical officer urgently, "more fighters are attacking the other ships in our formation. They're all using the same suicide tactics." On the Unbroken, Admiral Torres watched his fighter pilots make their attack runs. Each pilot knew they were probably going to die, but they also knew their sacrifice would give the larger ships a chance to win the battle. "All ships target the enemy vessel with damaged shields," he ordered. "Concentrate all firepower on that ship. Let's finish what Lieutenant Park started." The human fleet focused its entire attack on the damaged hegemony cruiser. Nuclear missiles detonated against the weakened shields. Railgun slugs punched through the defensive barrier and struck the hull directly. For the second time in the battle, a hegemony ship found itself defenseless against enemy fire. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Admiral Kethvar made a decision that would haunt him forever. He activated his long-range communications array and sent an emergency signal to Hegemony High Command. The message was simple: request immediate reinforcements for a primitive species showing unexpected resistance. Within 3 hours, 8 more hegemony cruisers arrived in the system. Grand Admiral Zephron, commanding the largest hegemony battle fleet assembled in 50 years, studied the tactical situation with growing disbelief. "Explain this engagement to me," he demanded as his flagship, the massive dreadnought Supreme Authority, took position at the center of the formation. Admiral Kethavar's image appeared on the communication screen. His ship showed obvious battle damage, and his normally perfect uniform was torn and stained. "Grand Admiral, we encountered a primitive species that refused standard surrender demands. They have proven unusually resistant to our standard tactics." "Resistant?" Zephron examined the battle reports with amazement. "You mean a single primitive ship managed to damage 2 hegemony cruisers?" "The situation has escalated, sir. They now have 12 ships in the system, and their tactics are unprecedented." Grand Admiral Zephron watched the sensor displays showing the current engagement. Human ships were weaving through hegemony formations, using hit-and-run attacks that maximized their primitive weapons' effectiveness. Their fighters continued suicide runs against shield generators. Most disturbing, they showed no signs of weakening resolve despite massive casualties. "What is the human casualty rate?" he asked. "Approximately 60%, sir." but they continue fighting with the same intensity. Zephron could not comprehend this information. No rational species continued fighting after losing half their forces. The logical response was surrender and negotiation. These humans seemed to prefer death to submission. On the human flagship Unbroken, Admiral Torres received word that more alien ships were entering the system. His tactical officer updated the display to show 12 enemy vessels now surrounding the human fleet. "Admiral," said Captain Rodriguez, who had transferred from the heavily damaged Defiance, "we're now outnumbered 3-1. Enemy technology is still superior to ours. Should we consider attempting to negotiate?" Torres looked around the bridge at his remaining crew. They were exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered. Half the human fleet was either destroyed or too damaged to fight effectively. By any reasonable military analysis, they should surrender. "Captain," replied Torres, "let me ask you something. When we left Earth, what were our orders?" "To explore space and make peaceful contact with alien civilization, sir." "And what happened when we tried to make peaceful contact?" Rodriguez understood immediately. They demanded our surrender without even attempting communication. Exactly. These aliens don't want peace. They want slaves, and humans don't make good slaves. Torres activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. I know you're all tired. I know we've lost good people today. I know the odds against us seem impossible." He paused, looking at the tactical display showing enemy ships surrounding them. "But I want you to remember something. Today humanity learned we are not alone in the universe. We discovered that space is controlled by an empire that demands submission from every species they encounter. They expect us to kneel, to become servants in our own galaxy." Torres's voice grew stronger. "Our ancestors fought against tyranny on Earth for thousands of years. They died rather than accept slavery. They chose freedom over safety, dignity over survival. Today we carry on that tradition among the stars." The Admiral gestured toward the view screen showing the enemy fleet. "These aliens have superior technology. They have more ships. They probably have better training. But they have one critical weakness. They have forgotten how to fight an enemy that refuses to lose." On the Hegemony Dreadnought, Grand Admiral Zephron decided to end this embarrassing engagement quickly. He opened communications with the human fleet. "Human Admiral, I am Grand Admiral Zephron of the Hegemony High Command. You now face the largest battle fleet assembled in 50 years. Your resistance ends now." The alien commander's image was imposing. His ship dwarfed even the largest human vessels. Behind him, 11 more cruisers waited in perfect formation. "You have fought bravely," continued Zephron, "but continued resistance is pointless. Surrender now and your species will be allowed to exist as servants of the hegemony. Refuse, and we will eliminate every human in this system." Admiral Torres listened to the translation with his senior officers. The alien was offering slavery as a mercy. The alternative was total destruction. "What is our fleet status?" he asked quietly. "4 ships still combat effective," replied his tactical officer. "Ammunition reserves at 30%. Most of our fighters have been destroyed." "And their fleet?" 12 ships, mostly undamaged. "The new arrivals have full shields and weapons." Torres nodded. The mathematical odds were clear. Humanity could not win this battle through conventional tactics. But humans had never relied solely on conventional tactics. "Open a channel to the alien commander," he ordered. Grand Admiral Zephron waited for the human response. Most species begged for mercy at this point. A few tried to negotiate better terms for their surrender. None had ever continued to resist when faced with such overwhelming force. "Alien Admiral," said Torres when the communication link opened, "I have a counter-proposal for you." "You are in no position to make proposals, human." "I disagree. You see, you're thinking about this all wrong. You believe this battle is about ships and weapons and technology, but it's not. This battle is about ideas." Torres gestured toward his crew. "You offer us slavery and call it mercy. You demand submission and call it peace. But humans have a different idea. We believe that freedom is worth any price." Zephron listened with growing confusion. The human admiral was speaking as if his defeated fleet still had options. "You have 12 ships," continued Torres. "We have 4. You can probably destroy us all in the next hour. But let me explain what happens after that." The human admiral leaned forward in his command chair. "We sent a message to Earth before this battle began. By now every human in our space knows that we encountered an alien empire that demands surrender. They know we chose to fight instead of kneel. Torres smiled coldly. Do you know what humans do when we're threatened with slavery? We build more ships. We train more pilots. We develop better weapons. And we never ever stop fighting. Your threats are meaningless, replied Zephyron. Your technology is primitive. Your fleet is tiny. Today, yes. But what about tomorrow? What about next year? How many ships will you need to keep humanity enslaved? How many battles will you have to fight against a species that prefers death to submission? The human admiral stood up. You can win this battle, alien admiral, but you cannot win the war. Because every time you kill a human, 10 more will volunteer to take their place. Every time you destroy one of our ships, we'll build 2 more. You'll spend the rest of your existence fighting an enemy that gets stronger every time you defeat us. Grand Admiral. Zephyron felt a chill as he realized the human was describing exactly what had happened during this engagement. Each time they destroyed human ships, more had appeared. Each time they killed human pilots, others had taken their place. What are you proposing? He asked carefully. Simple. Withdraw from this system. Recognize human space as independent territory. Trade with us instead of trying to conquer us. Treat us as equals instead of slaves. And if we refuse, Torres gestured toward the tactical display. Then you'll spend the next 1,000 years learning why humans never developed a word for surrender. The communication ended abruptly. On the Hegemony flagship, Grand Admiral Zephyron studied the sensor data from the engagement. These humans had inflicted casualties on his fleet that no primitive species should have been able to achieve. They had fought with a skill and determination that spoke of a warrior culture forged by millennia of conflict. Sir, asked his tactical officer, should we proceed with the attack? Zephyron considered his options. He could destroy the remaining human ships easily, but the human admiral had raised troubling questions. How many more ships would come? How much would it cost to conquer a species that fought like demons? Sir, prompted his officer. Stand down weapons, ordered Zephyron quietly. Open a channel to Hegemony High Command. I need to speak with the Council immediately. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Hegemony fleet was about to withdraw without achieving total victory. The humans had won something more valuable than a single battle. They had won respect. 6 months after the battle at Kepler 442, Grand Admiral Zephyron stood before the Hegemony High Council on their capital world. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all conquered and absorbed into the Empire over 3 millennia of expansion. Explain your decision to withdraw from the human system, demanded High Counselor Vex Theris, her forearms gesturing impatiently. Your fleet was victorious. The primitive species was defeated, yet you chose to retreat. Zephyron activated the holographic display showing the battle statistics. The humans suffered 67% casualties and continued fighting. They used suicide tactics against superior technology. They showed no signs of weakening resolve despite overwhelming odds. So? Asked another counselor. Many species fight desperately before accepting the inevitable. This was different, replied Zephyron. Analysis of their communication intercepts shows they were not fighting from desperation. They were fighting from conviction. They genuinely believed that freedom was more important than survival. The council members looked at each other with confusion. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had encountered hundreds of species. All had eventually submitted when faced with overwhelming force. The concept of choosing death over servitude was alien to their experience. Furthermore, continued Zephyron, intelligence reports indicate the humans have used the past 6 months to dramatically expand their military capabilities. They have launched over 40 new warships and are recruiting volunteers faster than they can train them. High Counselor Vexus Theris studied the data with growing alarm. How is this possible? We destroyed most of their fleet. That appears to have motivated them rather than discouraged them. Our xenopsychology experts believe the humans interpret military defeats as proof they need to fight harder, not as evidence they should surrender. The council chamber filled with worried murmurs. This behavior pattern was unprecedented in galactic history. On Earth, Admiral Torres walked through the massive shipyard orbiting Luna. Construction crews worked around the clock building the new fleet. The sight filled him with pride and determination. Status report, he asked Captain Chen, who had survived her injuries and been promoted to oversee the expansion program. 43 ships completed, sir. Another 60 under construction. We've had over 2 million volunteers for military service. We're actually having to turn people away. Torres nodded. The alien attack had united humanity in a way nothing else could have. Every nation on Earth was contributing ships, crews, and resources to the common defense. What about the new weapon systems? The kinetic accelerators are performing beyond expectations. We've managed to increase projectile velocity by 30%. The new nuclear warheads are 50% more powerful, and the armor improvements should let our ships survive twice as much damage. Captain Chen led him to an observation window overlooking the construction bays. Admiral, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think they'll come back? Torres considered the question carefully. I hope not, Captain. But if they do, they're going to discover that attacking humanity was the biggest mistake in their empire's history. In the hegemony capital, the debate continued for weeks. Some council members argued for immediate military action to crush the human rebellion before it could spread. Others worried about the cost of fighting a species that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. The decision came when intelligence reports revealed something that shocked the entire council. 3 other species in hegemony space had begun asking questions about human resistance. The idea that submission to the Empire was not inevitable was spreading. We face a choice, announced High Counselor Vexus Theris to the assembled council. We can attempt to crush the humans with overwhelming force, risking a long and costly war. Or we can try a different approach. What do you suggest? Asked Grand Admiral Zephyron. Negotiation. We offer the humans what they claim to want: independence and equality. We establish formal diplomatic relations and trade agreements. We show the galaxy that cooperation is more profitable than conquest. The council erupted in angry debates. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had ruled through force and intimidation. The idea of treating a primitive species as equals was revolutionary. But the practical arguments were compelling. Fighting humans would be expensive and difficult. Their warrior culture meant they would never truly submit. And their example was already inspiring other species to question hegemony authority. 3 months later, Ambassador Kethvar, former admiral, now diplomat, arrived at the edge of human space aboard an unarmed vessel. His mission was to negotiate the first formal treaty between the hegemony and an independent species in galactic history. Admiral Torres met the alien delegation aboard the neutral space station humanity had constructed for the talks. The meeting room was simple and functional, reflecting human practical values. Ambassador, said Torres as the 2 leaders faced each other across a conference table, I must admit I'm surprised to see you here. 6 months ago your empire was trying to conquer us. Kethvar nodded slowly. His experience commanding against human forces had changed his perspective fundamentally. Admiral, I have spent my career conquering primitive species. But humans are not primitive. You are something we have never encountered before. And what is that? A species that values freedom more than safety. The hegemony has maintained peace for 3 millennia by offering protection in exchange for submission. But you cannot protect someone who would rather die than be protected. The alien ambassador activated a holographic display showing the proposed treaty terms. The hegemony offers formal recognition of human independence, established borders for human space, trade agreements on equal terms, and a mutual defense pact against external threats. Torres studied the terms carefully. They were far better than anything he had expected. What does the hegemony want in return? Peace, and perhaps something more valuable, an ally who can teach us to fight like you do. I don't understand. Kethvar leaned forward. Admiral, the galaxy is larger than either of our civilizations. There are threats beyond our current borders that neither humans nor the hegemony could face alone. We have technology and resources. You have something equally valuable, the knowledge of how to fight against impossible odds. The negotiations continued for weeks. In the end, humanity gained everything they had fought for: independence, equality, and the right to exist on their own terms. But the real victory was deeper than any treaty. Humanity had proven that advanced technology could not defeat an enemy that simply refused to lose. They had shown the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. 2 years later, when the Void Swarm invaded from beyond the galactic rim, it was human tactics and human determination that led the combined defense. Species that had submitted to the hegemony for millennia learned to fight with the fierce joy that humans brought to every battle. The aliens who had first locked their sensors onto a single human warship had expected to encounter just another primitive species to be easily conquered. Instead, they discovered something that changed the galaxy forever: the absolute conviction that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Admiral Torres often reflected on that first encounter as he commanded the joint human hegemony fleet against the Void Swarm. The aliens had been right about one thing: they were not ready for humanity. But then again, the galaxy had not been ready for humans either. In the end, that had made all the difference. The war against the Void Swarm lasted 5 years. It was won not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by the simple human belief that some battles had to be fought, regardless of the odds. When the last void ship was destroyed, the surviving species of the galaxy understood something new: that courage was more powerful than any weapon, and that free peoples would always fight harder than slaves. The hegemony still existed, but it had changed. No longer an empire of conquest, it became an alliance of equals. Species joined voluntarily, attracted by the benefits of cooperation rather than forced into submission by superior firepower. And at the center of it all were the humans, the species that had looked at the most powerful empire in galactic history and said no. The species that had turned certain defeat into unlikely victory through nothing more than the refusal to surrender. The galaxy learned that day that some ideas were more dangerous than any weapon: the idea that every sentient being deserved freedom, the idea that no one had the right to enslave others, the idea that dignity was worth dying for. These were human ideas, and once they were released into the galaxy, there was no putting them back. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not the battles they won, but the example they set. They showed the galaxy what it meant to be truly free, and once that lesson was learned, the old ways of conquest and submission could never return. The aliens had been right to fear what their sensors had detected, but they had feared the wrong thing. They had worried about human weapons and human ships. They should have worried about human ideas, because ideas once released could never be destroyed, and the human idea of freedom had just been set loose among the stars.